Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for Up and Out. Today, we are thrilled to be joined by Jamie Grace Alexander, who is an artist and activist from Baltimore, who will be talking to us about art activism and the intersections of both of those things. Hi, Jamie Grace. Thank you so much for joining us.
I'm happy to be here.
Thank you. So, before we get into all of the things that you do, I would love if you would tell us a little bit about yourself. So, like I mentioned, you are an artist, a musician, a skateboarder, an activist, just a general kick ass person. What words do you use to identify the kind of work that you do?
I would definitely put trans activist at the height of that list. Definitely prioritizing Black trans women, of which I am one. That's my community, and that's like the focus of a lot of my work. I think that beyond that, I'm an abolitionist working towards like Black liberation broadly, and I'm an artist, so I think that that approach can be done in like a multidisciplinary way that is on all fronts very creative and engages people working together.
Totally. I feel like, well, we'll get into all the details, but uh, both in the projects that you work on that are art, there's like elements of your community and the work that you do for your community. And in your activism, there's a lot of art and play and joy present. Um, so, when did you become involved in? I know, like the word activism is a little dry sounding, and the work that you do has to do with who you are, who your community is, and like making sure that there is space for people to thrive and like fighting the things that make that impossible. But I'm going to use the word for now
Sure.
to move forward. So, what when did you become involved in activism in Baltimore? And is there like a specific event that predicated your involvement or you moving towards like trans activism and activism in general?
Sure. I became involved like I guess pretty soon after I came out. I was like very much looking for community in Baltimore City. I was a freshman at university, and like I was around queer people at my school for the first time. I mean, like I had like queer friends in high school, but it was like different. Like there were like queer groups and queer classes and queer clubs, and but even more than that, like I had access to queer community through Baltimore City. So I would be taking the bus out from my campus to go to like different events that I would find on Facebook. I'm probably like 17 at the time. Um, and I think it was just like through showing up consistently to the same organizations events or just like whatever I could find, whatever would get me out of my dorm room.
Hmm.
Um, I would take the bus to go there. But I think it was really that consistency that like that other activists responded to and was like, sure, we'll give you whatever role. But I think that even way back then, I remember one of my first things that I was involved in was there was a rally outside of the Baltimore City Board of Education building on North Avenue, and it was raining. Everybody had umbrellas, and there were everybody like on megaphones. And I definitely remember, I just showed up to show up, but at that point, I had been to like 4 or 5 events by that same organization, the Baltimore Transgender Alliance, and they were like, "Do you want to like read a poem?" So I did, and I feel like even then, like my engagement in activism was like when I was given that chance, it was creative, it was artistic, and it was like expressive.
That's so awesome. And that was, how old are you now? You're 22?
I'm 23.
23,
Yes.
sorry. Um,
I'm still young, still
well,
fresh, spry.
you bring the energy, which I really appreciate. And I feel like I think I moved back to Baltimore when like about 3 years ago, and you were uh, just had your hands in so many things and
Yeah.
had that energy. So uh, I think for a lot of people who are sort of stepping into looking outside themselves and looking at activism and advocacy, it can feel scary to get involved in things. And it's inspiring to hear about you just like hitting the ground running and being like, yeah, I'm going to read this poem, like uh, meeting people when they ask you to do something and taking it to the next level.
Yeah.
Um, so, uh, like I said 100 times, you do so much stuff. What are the projects, both in activism and art, that you are most proud of being involved in, or the outcomes that you're most proud of?
Um, there's quite a few. I think that some of my like most impressive accomplishments or the accomplishments that I feel like have an impact that I can evaluate. It's really hard to evaluate the impact of a creative project.
Yeah.
Um, but that's not really necessarily my goal. Anyways, I'm getting away from it. I'm really proud of some of the advocacy that I've done in repealing the panic defense in the state of Maryland, which is like a really antiquated legal defense that basically says like if a gay person's like coming on to you, you can like claim hysteria at a homosexual advance and like whatever violence you do to them is like justified because they're gay, which is absurd. So I'm really glad that that's off the books. That I feel very proud of that accomplishment. And also there's you can get an X identifier as your gender marker on Maryland state IDs. And that was another thing that I was a part of that I feel really proud of in my advocacy.
Those are
I
both
think,
huge deals. Yeah.
yeah. I think creatively, I'm really proud of a project that I started called Gender Museum, which is basically just about showcasing like all the different ways that trans can look like. And through that project, we did like a show at Baltimore City Hall that I felt really proud of because all the Baltimore City Hall politicians were like, when is all this trans art coming down?
Oh my
Like, when is
God.
it going to go away? And I felt very proud that they had that response to it, or just that like all these Baltimore City politicians were forced to interact with trans bodies and trans themes and trans art. Like
Yeah.
every time they went into their little office to do their little bureaucratic work, I felt very proud of that. And then also there's a big mural project that I completed with Baltimore Safe Haven last summer on the stroll, like up by like, I guess it's Charles and 22nd and 23rd. It says Black Trans Lives Matter. And it's beautiful and it's just like the perfect place for it. And I feel so proud that like I was part of the team that helped that exist, because even before it existed, it was there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I just made it real, or we made it real, and that was really like really special. But it's also just like so huge. It's like 2 city blocks dedicated to Black trans lives, and that's nice.
For real. Sorry. It's amazing, and I'm trying to find a picture so that we can put it on screen for a minute because it is so beautiful. Let's see if I can bring this up.
So I listed 2 like more like technical advocacy type things, and then 2, yeah, like creative projects. Yes, Black Trans Lives Matter.
It's gorgeous, and it's amazing to see on the street as well.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, I would love to hear more about the Gender Museum, because that did that start as an Instagram project?
Yeah, I guess. So I was telling you about that group that I started with when I was just like a wee queer little teen, the Baltimore Transgender Alliance. But part of the goal of that organization was to like grow trans-led projects. So Gender Museum was my little queer test tube baby of a project. Like growing. I think it was also just like a Trojan horse that I used to enter the art world. Like, look at this fancy, accomplished museum. And then I'm inside it and I pop out and I like don't have any respectability politics. And
Yeah.
like it's fine. It's fine. Like, and it worked. That's the crazy part, is that it literally worked exactly how it was supposed to. It started on Instagram because honestly, like for queer youth, like I thought about different ways of approaching the project when I was starting it. Like I had this idea of like gender museum, like how could that be? How could this project come to be? And I was like, should I like interact with existing museum world? It's like, no, they won't give me space. And then I'm like, should I like create my own little like physical space and then put like queer people up on pedestals? And then I'm like, okay, but then maybe cis people are gonna be the ones who like come in and stare at them. And that's not what I want. Or should it be about like gender, like objects or pieces of clothing or something that have a lot of gender in them, like removed from the context of the people who wear or use them? And I'm like, maybe not that either. And it was actually through talking to my queer elders that I was like, yeah, like Instagram, so many people are like showing what transness looks like for them on Instagram. And I feel like at the time of starting the project, like there was just, and this is still a problem, but it was really bad then, of just like, there's only one way to be trans. Like you need to be like thin and white, and like you need to do the XYZ to look androgynous, or like you need to do XYZ in order to like pass as a trans man. And it's like I wanted to completely not deal with that at all. No, like, I mean, that was like absolutely not the goal of the project. It was just like to show that gender is like really subjective for each person, and especially each trans person. And I feel like it definitely accomplished that. Of like, sometimes queer youth would like go on Gender Museum and just like, it's like an archive where you can be like, okay, I don't really identify with this person's gender, but like, and maybe like you might not identify with their gender visually, but when you read their caption, maybe you would. And I felt like that was also just like really interesting, a very gender expansive project. So I felt really, and I just recently stopped or just like closed the Gender Museum. RIP Gender Museum, sad. But it's okay. Rest in peace. You did your job, old girl. I'm like,
I mean, it's
Trojan horse.
I mean, the great thing about it is still, you know, although it's not updating, it's still there, and it still like exists as a gallery. And I'm going to put that on screen for a sec as well. We can just scroll through it real fast. Take a look at just the beginning of it. So
there's some good genders in there.
It's really amazing. They're people, you know, sharing their pictures.
You should click one.
Art. Yeah, let's click one. So it looks like, will you talk a little bit about like what people submit and what
sure,
like, what they share?
Well, like people would share all sorts of different stuff, whether it was like art. Most of the time it's selfies, because I feel like that's easiest, and then people like really expound upon things in the caption. But after like our first year of operations, we got grant funding, and I was like, let me give that to trans people of color. Exactly that. I was like, we're gonna give you money. We're gonna give you money for literally existing as a trans person. Like,
That part is so awesome.
Give me your Cash App, and I will send you $30 for making a silly Instagram post like amazing.
Yeah. That's so great. I could like look at it all day. And you know, as, you know, queer and trans people, and like, as I'm sure, like as a Black trans woman, you're asked to share your experience and be um, like a leader of experience for free, uh, and like asked to explain yourself and explain your community. And um, the beauty, I think, of the Gender Museum is to allow people to, you know, be really subjective, talk about
Yeah.
what that word means to them, and express themselves and be compensated in kind is all so special. And it's very by us for us. Like the idea, what you said about people going into a museum and like who gets to enter a museum, what does it mean to go into a space and like look at objects, and uh, you know, that can feel so much more removed from, you know, like a person to person interaction.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful and cool project. I really
Thank
appreciate
you.
going into that.
But it's so much harder to evaluate whether that project is successful or
Yeah.
not. You know, it's like, did Gender Museum end gender?
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
no, it didn't. Like, we are sorry, the Trojan horse failed. Like, but it accomplished some of its other goals of like, yeah, like look at how gender expansive this museum structure is compared to existing museums. Like, they're way behind. Like, Gender Museum is
Definitely.
like miles ahead, and it's not even a real museum. It's not even a real place.
Yeah. Well, I think that's so beautiful and smart too, is just being like, yeah, like I don't have to pay to use the word museum. Like I remember the first time I saw Gender Museum on Instagram just through like other queer people in Maryland, and I was like, what is this? Like, is there a building? Like, was so excited to engage with it. And it was like a Trojan horse, like the language pulls people in, and also reframes, you know, people are sharing their images and their experiences on Instagram, but like giving putting a pedestal under that is really freaking cool, I think. But I understand what you mean about like it's not a cut and dry project, and you
Mhm.
can't evaluate it the same way that you can evaluate something more concrete. Uh, but I appreciate I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Um, so I know that you talked about both work that you did. So the gender marker X and the trans panic, or the panic uh, defense. Those did you work on those both through the ACLU?
Um, no.
Hmm.
Well, kind of. Uh I mean, like, those things will never be a priority to cis people.
Yeah,
They will never be a priority to cis people. Like, it will always have to, the urgency will always have to come from us. And
yeah.
indeed, like,
So they worked on it through you.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like, other people also worked on it. Like, Free State worked on, I think, both
Hmm.
bills. ACLU gave testimony in the same way that I gave testimony. But um yeah, I mean, it's also, these political spaces are very extremely inhospitable. Like, I in working on the Gender X bill and the Panic Defense bill before I worked at the ACLU, because I was doing this work before I was like getting paid well to do the work.
Yeah.
But I wasn't respected by the people who I was there to address. Like that, like it was like a panel of like white lawyers went before us, and then like the panel of like community affected people went, and by that time the legislators like were like yawning, like leaving the room, like. But I feel like when I worked at ACLU, I definitely had more weight behind what I was saying.
Yeah.
I also had like access to a lot more mentorship in my colleagues at that workplace, just like what is the next move for this bill. I feel like I was a lot more empowered to do the work.
Yeah.
Whereas I couldn't really be engaged in the political process as a Black transgender youth. It was too distant from me. I didn't understand that process, and it's definitely taken years to be able to know like how a bill becomes a law.
Yeah. I don't know it.
I mean,
appreciate you kind of do.
Literally, it's not easy, and also like as much as that matters too, it's like that's not even the main issue. Like the main issue is like Black trans people being safe, you know, and this is like a way of addressing that, or a way of giving Black trans people more agency within the systems that exist. But it's like that the goal of Black trans people being safe isn't gonna be accomplished by a bill or a law.
And one that addresses violence that happens. It's obviously it's important, but it's a punitive, or like it's a Band-Aid. It's not stopping the wound from happening.
And that's a really great point. It's like the panic defense is a legal defense.
Yeah.
So basically, it's like it basically just like repealing the panic defense just made killing gay people for being gay illegal again. That's all it did. It's like that was already illegal. Like, so what is even being accomplished? But also it's like, yeah, it was a lot of work. It was hard. And it was something that my community lifted up and was like, this is a really important legal advocacy issue for the Black trans community. We don't want this bill on the books anymore.
Yeah.
Because the process of seeking justice for a Black transgender woman who's been killed is like so dehumanizing. And I feel like the trial process, and this is like so dark, but like dehumanizes those women and humanizes the perpetrator. And this bill is in defiance of that, and is in defiance of like all of the transphobia throughout the legal system as it exists right now. So I felt good about the small pinch, the small hand that I could move the needle forward for that.
Definitely. Yeah, it's, you know, it's a big deal, and it's also an infuriating small part.
It really is.
Thing. And I think, like, I don't know, we had, in Prince George's County, we had like the first Pride on record, and we collaborated with the Human Rights Council to like have a vigil for Zoe Spears and Ashanti Carmen. And it's like, it's beautiful and it means something, but it's not going to change the fact that that violence happens in our community. Right. And it's a little piece of a very big thing. And I appreciate that you are able to talk about like the ways that collaborating with like a nonprofit or an NGO can be beneficial, but you are also I don't know. I feel your acknowledgement of the limits of that kind of organizing. Um, what feels powerful and challenging about grassroots organizing or like community-based organizing?
There's a lot, okay, there's a lot of different types of organizing too. Like, there's like local organizing, I feel like hyper local
Mhm.
organizing, or like mutual aid, which is like amazing. Probably my favorite is like working together with the neighbors, the people that are physically closest to you to make life better collectively
Mhm.
for people who are in and outside of that group. I think that that's like extremely productive form of organizing that literally anybody can do anywhere.
Yeah.
And it's not always called organizing. Like that sometimes that happens through like church groups. Sometimes it's called like volunteering. Sometimes it's called like helping the needy, or just like there's all sorts of different ways that people frame those actions or those movements towards collective good. Um, but I think that there's also something to be said in like collective power and mobilization, like the mass mobilization that we saw in June, and being a part of that as like organizers' role is to like, there's always going to be a waxing and waning of the interest and involvement of people generally in those mass mobilization
Yeah.
moments, but it's the organizer's job to like funnel people in the right direction, to like make them invested for as long as possible, to like make sure that their participation like isn't performative,
Mhm.
and to like hold them accountable to like the standards that we hold ourselves accountable as organizers. Like, oh my god, to be a teenage organizer, that was wild, because
Yeah,
that's one thing, is like the burnout is so real, and
definitely.
also like no, like I don't want to like diminish the contributions of like youth activists, but like no child should bear the weight of that,
Yeah,
of like the life and safety of their community. Like it's so, and I've seen it like exhaust so many Baltimore activists
definitely.
who like were involved in youth activism and aren't involved in activism anymore
Mhm.
because they burned out, because they were just responsible for too much. Too many people put that on them, and that's
Yeah,
so often like what happens to Black women as organizers. But yeah, protect yourself from burnout. I'm rambling a little bit, but
it's all
okay, good.
it's great to hear. I mean, it's the sort of like double whammy of, the double wield of, like, being tokenized and having to do all the work, especially, like,
Yeah,
gendered work
yeah,
and racialized work of,
yeah.
like, care and, just having it sounds exhausting and frustrating. Do you have recommendations for how to like protect someone from burnout or protect oneself, especially young people who are feeling like overburdened from advocacy or just like being in a really crappy world right now?
I think that like the best activists work to the skills that are their strengths,
Hmm.
and don't feel ashamed to say no to projects that they know they wouldn't do a good job at. Um, like, or potentially like just doing a project for as much time as you can and saying no when you can't do it anymore. Like, and not, the burnout comes from just like beating yourself up, like not letting yourself rest, not letting yourself um, take breaks, making yourself out to be like so strong. but it's not, it doesn't have to be like that. Like, and it doesn't have to be so dire, but
Yeah.
I think that everybody does have a part to play. So, like, whatever extra capacity you have, give that.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, take breaks. Don't feel ashamed about taking breaks. I feel I'll occasionally have a moment where I'm like, why am I not doing as much organizing right now? And then I'm like, I was doing so much
Yeah.
like 6 months ago, 1 year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago. Where like it's like I can take a break and skate for a little bit. It's fine. Like I'll get on my silly little wheels and go, and it's fine.
Yeah, totally. I
Having
mean,
hobbies that make you happy.
yeah, you have to have an outlet for joy, and it's easy, I think, the burnout in, you know, in communities that are doing a lot of support, and for people who just have their eye on the need of people around them, uh, it's super real. And I appreciate hearing anyone, I don't know, it's hearing anyone like know how to take care of themselves, or at least like trying to listen to that part of themselves, because it's really, really important. Before I move any further, because I do want to talk to you about skating, I'm just going to let everyone know who's tuning in. If you have questions for Jamie Grace, let us know in the comments, and we will ask them in just a few minutes. Okay, so we have a question from Miss Vivian. How has COVID-19 impacted what you're doing?
Um, that's a good question. I mean, like COVID-19 has spanned the course of 2 years at this
Yeah.
point. And it's like over the course of those 2 years, COVID-19 was not the only limiting factor, but COVID-19 was at the root of a lot of the problems. So I would say that like COVID-19, like I can't make a generalization because last June, COVID-19 affected the amount of people that were coming out to collective actions because
Yeah,
people had
definitely.
previously been stuck in their house. But now COVID-19 is doing the opposite, like keeping people in their houses, like keeping people like stagnant or like emotionally, morally like unaffected, or just like fatigued or tired of like experiencing the same terrible news forever, so they don't want to do as much for Black liberation anymore. COVID-19 has affected like how I take care of myself, like what my friendships look like. It's affected where I live, how I live. Like, I think that the only way that I can answer that question is that it has. It has affected me in my work and my life, but not in a way that's consistent throughout these 2 years.
I feel that. Thank you so much for Miss Vivian for that question. Thank you, Jamie Grace, for the thoughtful answer. Rebecca asked, for teens in Prince George's County who want to get started in advocacy, where should they begin? I know this isn't the county you're based in, but I'm wondering if you have any ideas for people who either are part of the LGBTQ plus community, or allies, or just people who want to get involved in advocacy in a bigger picture.
Right. I would say, excuse me, like how I started, first it would be like doing like Google searches based on like your area, or like searching social media for like groups or organizations or wherever like events would come from. You want to be like following those pages, or like looking at those pages, or like showing up to those places, and then showing up consistently. So I guess the first thing is like making sure that you know what's happening in your local community through social media and the internet. That would be my number one tip. And then once you know what's happening, show up and show up consistently and with purpose. Like, offering to help, offering what capacity you have, being open about the skills that you have, like trying to make yourself comfortable in community spaces so that you can let like your own personal light shine.
Mm-hmm.
That would be my advice. And then from there, like things will just develop. I guess the other like bonus points would be like reading. Like I think that there's a lot of
Love
really
that.
good, yes. There's a lot of really good like literature and resources about activism, and I think that reading helps me think abstractly as an activist.
Mm-hmm.
Reading fiction, reading nonfiction, like helps me think about different approaches to liberation movement. And I'm gonna plug my laptop in. So
Oh yeah, no problem. While Jamie Grace plugs her laptop in, I'm gonna remind everyone that we are the Prince George's County Memorial Library System. You can visit us at pgcmls.info, and you can use the Libby app to get ebooks and e-audiobooks, including books about activism, about historical and current day issues and solidarity movements, and also fiction like science fiction, fantasy, and speculative fiction, which I like in terms of finding things that inspire me to change the world I live in. And if anyone else has a question, you're welcome to let us know below. We will be wrapping up shortly, although I could talk to Jamie Grace all day. Welcome back. I wanted to ask, since we're big book fans here, is there, especially I'd love to know about fiction that inspires you and your work, like looking towards futures.
should I go to my bookshelf?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna go to my bookshelf. I'll be right back with some picks. I was
right. Oh, I'm so excited. For those who's tuning in, if there are any books that inspire you, either books about community organizing and justice movements, or fiction that inspires you, let us know below. I love N.K. Jemison's science fiction work. I find it really inspiring because a lot of it is about communities banding together to support each other. You can find that on the Libby app with your Prince George's County Memorial Library System card. Let's see what's coming up.
I couldn't pick just one, so I picked a bunch.
Nice.
All right. Stone Butch Blues.
Yeah.
Steinberg. This book is so good and so informative and formative. Like, I feel like entering queer community, it's like you're trying to unlearn this male-female binary, and you're like, it's such a strong connection with like elders throughout different eras of queerness, it shows that like queerness can look different for a person over the course of their lifetime according to the context that they're living in, and that can cause them benefits and problems that change over the course of their lives. And I think that that's just really, really beautiful and realistic. These are some other books by Leslie Feinberg: Rainbow Solidarity in Defense of Cuba, and then this little pamphlet, Transgender Liberation, a movement whose time has come. So Leslie Feinberg, great author, definitely was very formative to me when I was a teenager, like just learning like what queerness was, like more than like my own identity, like what is queerness, like what does that even mean?
Yeah.
Leslie Feinberg helped me understand that. Fiction, The Deep by Rivers Solomon. This is a book about mermaids, but our protagonist is one mermaid who basically holds all of the trauma and memory and history for her community collectively. Everybody else forgets the history of the people, but she's the historian, so she has to remember. And also it's gay. So of course you should read it.
Love that.
And then Wake. This is the hidden history of women-led slave revolts. And I think that these two books are also connected because the mermaids in the deep are descended from enslaved Africans who like died in the Middle Passage or became one with the water through the Middle Passage. Like they, instead of dying, they became mermaids. So I think that these two books together are very beautiful. Definitely changes, like, it definitely shows you that like trauma can be transformed through fiction. Mm-hmm. This is my favorite. I'm legitimately concerned about not being able to stop talking about this one, but this is New Mutants, which is
wow,
one part of the current X-Men story that's running. What I love most about the current X-Men story is that normally in X-Men, I'm obsessed with X-Men. Normally in X-Men, the good mutants are fighting the bad mutants. The good gay people are fighting with the radical gay people. It's not like that right now. They're all on a separatist island that is like blackmailing human governments for like resources. But New Mutants is my favorite title in the series because it's about like the young mutants being mentored by like the older mutants.
Wow, that sounds so awesome. I need
yes, and that's my favorite part of the X-Men stories is when the big X-Men are like, listen up, kid, you gotta do it like this. Or like teaching them how to control their powers or like how to like work well together or how to overcome their trauma. Because a lot of the current X-Men story is about overcoming trauma and like, okay, we've gotten ourselves to utopia. Now it's time to like heal and like stop repeating these same patterns that we've seen play out, like these same tired narratives. So I'm highly recommend the current X-Men run. It might be hard to follow if you are not familiar with X-Men previously, but there are places to start and reading guides that you can find online if you search House of X, Powers of X.
Nice. Well, that's very exciting. I've never been a huge X-Men person, or I haven't known like how to enter in, but one thing I always love about it is that it is like about a bunch of people's unique power and that being misunderstood, which to me is very queer. I think
it is.
And they end up being super queer, like literally too.
Oh, right now it's very, very queer. Very queer. Oh, absolutely. That comment. Very much so, yes.
Yeah, for real. We've been talking a lot about how comics and cartoons have influenced us, and both like queer subtext and queer actual texts over the past couple months in the teen programming we've done. So I love hearing that from you, Jamie Grace. And so we're going to be wrapping up pretty soon. But before we did, I wanted to ask you about your skating, because not only you were saying skating is a way for you to express yourself and like beat burnout, but not to be outdone, you're also working on, you also have like an advocacy project relating to skating as well, Solidarity Skateboards. That's, yeah. Let's see. Here's the link to the Instagram. Will you tell us about that?
Sure. Where do I guess I have ADHD, So skating is a way for me to vent my hyperactivity. And I'm very grateful for it in that way. I think that the skate park as a location can be pretty inhospitable, but also very fun. Especially if you're like new, it can look very intimidating because everybody's doing all these like wild tricks and you like don't know how to do anything, and it can be like it's very easy for you to compare yourself to other people, and then that sucks and doesn't feel good. But I'm lucky enough to have like a group of friends that doesn't see that comparison as a part of skating, and I think that most skaters don't do that. But it's still, as an environment, like still has a lot of work to do before it's like safe and comfortable all the time. So part of the project is doing that work, but also like as Black trans people, like we shouldn't be the people who are doing all that work all the time. And especially like me, I'm like an activist, and then I like go to do this thing that's like a hobby, and then I have to like go back to like working or like de-escalating, and I'm like, this is not, that's not how it's supposed to be. Like, come on.
Totally.
But yeah, Solidarity also like is gonna make skateboards soon. So if you need
that's
a skateboard,
so cool.
You should get one from Solidarity. That's the one that I skate.
That's gonna be really cool. What does your skateboard look like?
That one's further. Well, actually, should I grab that too?
If you want to.
Yeah. Right. I don't have the actual one that I'm writing right now because it's like all the way down the hall. But I have this one, which is my old one. It has flames on it.
Seen a lot of love.
Yes, it's very dirty, and you know,
it looks great.
Beaten up.
Is that your first board?
No. I feel like I switch out my board pretty regularly. But I think this is my favorite one.
It looks like a chariot.
It really is, and it's so big. Like, look how it's wider than my head.
I know. I don't know a lot about skateboarding, but it looks comfy.
Yes, it very much. It's retired now. She can rest.
Yeah, she can finally. While you can't, she can.
No, not at all.
That's awesome. So, is there anything else that you want to chat about? I know you. Before we wrap up, I want to say a couple other things that are really exciting that I think are cool that Jamie Grace does is playing a band called Black Vapor, which is really awesome, and hopefully playing some more shows when things get safer in the DMV, and also has a queer paper called Baltimore Queer Paper, which is like a historical document. Is that the right way to phrase it?
I can expound on both of those. Black Vapor is just like a very collaborative sound project with two like Black trans people whom I love with all of my heart. We've been playing music together for like 2 years, and I play the bass in the band, and I sing sometimes, and I scream sometimes, and there's moshing at our shows.
Yay!
So we love moshing. We have that to look forward to once things open up, feel more comfortable again. And I think like all of my projects, it definitely focuses on like the Black queer experience. As well, I have the Baltimore Queer Paper, which is research that I did when I was at college about like gay history here in Baltimore City, like through a bunch of different lenses and in a bunch of different time periods. But if you find yourself being like, if you know like Marcia and Sylvia as a part of New York's queer history, but you don't know any relevant touch points for Baltimore's queer history, I would say that this is a really great place to start. And I've written it to be accessible to whoever needs to read it. Like, it's not super long. Each article is like just 2 pages, like a front and a back, and they're just like little bite-sized topics. But by the time you're done reading it, like, you feel more grounded in local community, and hopefully you have like a different perspective on a bunch of different places in Baltimore City that were impacted by gay people and by gay life over the past, 30 to 100 years. I could bring that out for show and tell too.
Yeah. Oh, do you have a copy here?
I do.
Awesome. I put the there goes the skateboard. I put the link below so you can visit medium.com/Baltimore-queer-paper if you aren't so lucky to have a physical one. Oh my God, it's so beautiful.
It's literally so pretty. And then you can open it. If you're reading it on like the link, you can just pretend that you're doing this. But like, literally reading your little paper over your morning coffee, learning. We love to see it. Learning.
Love that. Because knowledge is power.
Yes, it is.
Oh my God, that's so great. Is there anything else that you want to chat about? Anything you're excited about?
I'm glad we did the book talk. I've been reading so much this summer, and I'm glad that I get to share a little bit. I could literally talk about books forever, though. I've been reading so much.
Oh my God. We love to hear that. Yeah, last summer I had such a hard time reading. Just there was so much going on. I was feeling so exhausted and just busy doing other things. And I'm glad this year I'm stoked to read some more. So I dropped all the recommendations you gave in the chat, and we have some, if not all of those, and we will make it a goal to get the rest of those books in our system as soon as we can, because there's some really cool stuff. Well, thank you so much, Jamie Grace. This has been awesome. I want to let everybody know that they can follow Jamie Grace on Facebook. Sorry, that says Instagram at facebook.com/Jamie G. Alexander, and follow, see what Jamie's involved in, and what awesome projects and like necessary action is coming up next. Thank you again so much for joining us, and I hope you have a beautiful day.
I will.
Bye.